I've made a fair amount of content in the last couple of weeks, being very frustrated with folks using extremely alarmist language, being hyperbolic about the things that the Trump regime says that they're going to do, what we are hypothesizing that they might, what we're fantasizing that they might do. In particular, the way that people are panicking, fear-mongering, giving Trump more power than he actually has. They are writing a fiction in their head in which Trump is all powerful. He's incredibly intelligent. He's strategic. He has these horrible plans that are inevitably going to come to pass. When you do that, you give him more power than he actually has. You make people fear him unnecessarily, and you make it harder. You make it harder for all of us to have the morale and the outlook that, like, this guy is actually a bumbling, fragile narcissist who has a very weak grasp on power, and that we absolutely can topple him. Right? You are carrying water for the regime when you make these posts that are like, Donald Trump is going to institute the Insurrection Act on April 20th. He's going to declare martial law on April 20th. Well, that didn't happen. It was never going to happen. When you say things like, Trump's birthday military parade is the first day of his military occupation and takeover of Washington, D.C., and then the entire United States. Like, you have no evidence for that. That is a fantasy you wrote in your head. You are freaking the fuck out. You need to check the facts and calm down, and you need to stop spreading fear-mongering bullshit all over the internet. And I actually made a video yesterday, I posted it this morning, where I said that the newest thing is, I see comment after comment after comment that Trump has declared war on the Democrats. He has declared war on blue states. No, he hasn't. He's increasing ICE raids in those states, and we knew that he was going to do that. And I know that I sound a little scoldy. I know I kind of have my mom voice on. I'm not trying to sound smug and be like, I knew these things weren't going to happen, and y'all are flipping out. Like, that's not my intent. I actually have a purpose behind being critical of that position and that kind of catastrophizing that folks are doing. And Alex here did a really good job of explaining it. Alarmism is dangerous precisely because it makes it harder to see the real threats and dangerous actions in our midst. That is precisely true. I want to give you an example from my real life. Some of you know that I had this really gnarly infection in my middle finger, which, in the days before IV antibiotics, I would have died from it. I was out weeding in the garden the other week, and I got a splinter in my finger, and within 24 hours, my whole finger was really red and swollen and very hot to the touch, and the infection was spreading. And then I was like, that, it's fine, it's probably just inflamed. And I was really ignoring this very real threat in front of me. It ended up being a strep infection, which is like, that's what causes necrotizing fasciitis. But I was really focused on worrying about something else in my life. That was kind of me running a worst case scenario about something that might happen, the likelihood of which was low, but I was still spending a lot of time worrying about it. You may not be aware, but I actually am a high anxiety person. Part of the reason that I make the kind of content where I'm like, y'all, we need to check the facts and we need to take it down a notch and we need to be realistic, is because when y'all say things like that, it freaks me out too. Initially, I have these moments where, like, it really freaks me out. And I say it as much because I understand it's really important that we check the facts and that we not get ourselves all spun up, right? I understand how devastating anxiety can be when you let it take over, how it can paralyze you. That's why I push back so strongly against all of this fear-mongering content and this way of framing situations in which we are fantasizing about a worst case scenario that might not come to pass. It actually probably has a very low likelihood of coming to pass, or that we mischaracterize an event and make it seem much more catastrophic than it actually is. We give Trump power that he doesn't have. So anyway, in my real life, I was worrying about this potential thing that maybe could happen. And I was ignoring what was happening in my finger. I was just like, this can't be that bad. I'm really wound up around this. This is taking all my focus, worrying if this is going to come to pass. And my eldest kid, who's 22, she was like, you need to go to the ER, Mom. And I was like, no, I'll just put it off. It's fine. Because I was so focused on this other issue in my life. And I put it off. And by the next morning, the inside of my elbow, like right here, it's on this arm though, was all red and swollen. And I was like, oh, there's a lymph node there. And that's not good. That's not good. And then I was starting to feel like systemically unwell. And I had actually waited too late to go get treatment, right? So they phoned me in some oral antibiotics, a couple of rounds of those, and they weren't working, and I was getting sicker. I was not feeling good. I was starting to run a fever, and I ended up having to go in to Kaiser Sunnyside and get IV antibiotics. right? If I'd waited much longer, I would have ended up getting septic and been very, very, very ill. It would have been a much bigger deal. Like people lose their fingers or their whole hands from things like people lose their lives from situations like that. So I had a very real, serious situation in my life that needed my attention, but I wasn't giving it the proper focus because I was spending my energy over here, sort of writing a fiction in my head, sort of catastrophizing about what if the worst case scenario happens in a private issue in my, own personal life, not a political issue. And I almost ended up in a real mess because of it. This thing over here did not come to pass. It was fine. I dealt with it. The worst case scenario did not happen at all. And I was lucky that this turned out so well. I was lucky that modern medicine was accessible to me. I was lucky that the antibiotics worked. I was lucky to be able to afford healthcare, to be able to afford to go to the emergency room. I was lucky that they saved my finger, right? And when I go for a walk, it still swells a lot. I don't know if you notice, I can't wear my rings on this hand anymore. I used to wear this ring on this hand. So yeah, I realize that's a little bit long and rambly, but my point here is that Alex is exactly right. Alex is exactly right. There are so many real threats from the Trump regime. There are real awful things that they are doing, that the MAGAs, Project 2025, the Republicans are doing on a local, state, and federal level that are all kind of sneaking under the radar. Did you notice they have announced that Congress has announced that they are trying to sell a bunch of federal land? That's land that belongs to us, the American people, and they want to sell it off to their MAGA buddies, to private businesses for a profit. That's our heritage. That's our land. But it doesn't make headline news because at the same time that was announced, there is this Donald Trump is declaring war on blue states. So I just want to encourage you, don't get spun up about hypotheticals. Don't buy into fear-mongering ways of phrasing what Trump is doing. Don't fantasize about worst-case scenarios in your head because you will be distracted from the very real, insidious, terrible things that this fragile regime is trying to do, right? Donald Trump is weak. He has a weak grasp on power. He's chaotic. He's not strategic. He's driven by his narcissism. The Republicans are driven by their greed and or their spinelessness, their fear. That doesn't mean that they aren't doing awful things. It doesn't mean that they aren't cruel. They are chaotic and cruel. And it's really important that we have our focus in the right places so that we can combat what they're doing, right? We need to be on the defensive and the offensive at the same time, instead of being distracted by fantasies that we are dreaming up or the panic that we are allowing to control us, right? We need to be driven not by our anxiety, but by our intent to protect the American people, to protect democracy from the fascist regime of Donald Trump. We don't have the luxury right now of ruminating in worst case scenarios and letting our anxiety run us. It's going to be a lot worse than a trip to the ER and a round of IV antibiotics, or maybe losing your finger, right? We need to have our head in the game. So even if I sound stern, even if I sound a little scoldy, please understand that that is very well intentioned on my part. And also that I'm speaking to myself every time I am speaking to y'all. The scolding is for me as well as everybody else. Let's make sure that we've got our head in the game. Let's make sure that we don't get distracted by our own anxiety, by fantasizing about worst case scenarios, especially right now when Trump actually is ramping up ICE raids, the terror of ICE in blue states. What are we doing to protect our immigrant neighbors? What are we doing in our neighborhoods to organize? I'm sure y'all have seen videos of folks that mobilize very quickly to get up in front of ICE and stop them from abducting people. What are we doing to pressure our attorneys general? What are we doing to pressure our governors in blue states? Right? What are we doing on a local level to organize? What are we doing in terms of pressuring electeds? All of that work is important work that we need to do. We need to be focused on it. We need to be engaging in it and not be distracted.